Hello! I'm Jack. This is my stream, and well, I need to get a new intro because that's all I ever say, and it doesn't really fit in with the aesthetic here, I guess, I've got. But can't really call it a casino yet because I don't have anything around to actually gamble with, so But it's not like I do any gambling on stream anyway at the moment. Wonder if I should start doing Genshin stuff. Yeah, I guess consistency is one thing. Try and move to the side of it so that it doesn't obscure chat. Move my table over just a little bit. There we go. Well, then it obscure. Oh well. Chat's more important. Okay. Anyway. So yeah. Chapter 29 was where we were up to in Hitchhiker's Guide. And last we left off, we had discovered the origins of Deep Thought, the computer that was supposed to give the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And we find that it wasn't the greatest computer ever made. Instead, it was only the second greatest. The greatest would be the computer designed by Deep Thought in order to give the answer to the question of the life, the universe and everything, because the answer was only 42, and if you don't actually know what the ultimate question of life, the universe and everything is, then how will you even understand the question, the answer? So, and that was where we left off, and most of the crew of the Heart of Gold, Arthur Dent, Trillian, Zaphod and Ford, had crashed, and Arthur was just taking a lift from a local Magrathian called Slarty Bartfast, who was a kindly old man, and he was teaching Arthur about the origins of Magrathia and how it had now gone into hibernation because it, as a planet-creating planet, I guess, actually kind of went out of business because it made the entire galaxy poor, and therefore there was no money to keep it sustained. So once the economy was going to fix itself, they would go back into business. Anyway, so I don't know how much that explained or if it made anything any clearer. Probably not, but let's get back to the rest of the crew of the Heart of Gold. Hey, chapter 29. Zaphod, wake up! Yeah. Hey, come on, wake up. Just let me stick to what I'm good at, yeah? Muttered Zaphod and rolled away from the voice back to sleep. Do you want me to kick you? Said Ford. Would it give you a lot of pleasure? Asked Zaphod blearily. No, nor me. So what's the point? Stop bugging me. Zaphod curled himself up. You got a double dose of the gas, said Trillian, looking down at him. 2 windpipes. And stop talking, said Zaphod. It's hard enough trying to sleep anyway. What's the matter with the ground? It's all cold and hard. It's gold, said Ford. With an amazingly balletic movement, Zaphod was standing and scanning the horizon, because that was how far the gold ground stretched in every direction, perfectly smooth and solid. It gleamed like... It's impossible to say what it gleamed like, because nothing in the universe gleams in quite the same way that a planet of solid gold does. Who put all that there? Yelped Zaphod, goggle-eyed. Don't get excited, said Ford. It's only a catalogue. A who? A catalogue, said Trillian. An illusion. How can you say that? Cried Zaphod, falling to his hands and knees and staring at the ground. He poked and prodded it with his fingernail. It was very heavy and very slightly soft. He could mark it with his fingernail. It was very yellow and very shiny, and when he breathed on it, his breath evaporated off it in that very peculiar and special way that breath evaporates off solid gold. Trillian and I came around a while ago, said Ford. We shouted and yelled till somebody came and then carried on shouting and yelling till they got fed up and put us in their planet catalogue to keep us busy till they were ready to deal with us. This is all sensor tape. Zaphod stared at him bitterly. Ah, shit, he said. You wake me up from my own perfectly good dream to show me somebody else's. He sat down in a huff. What's all that series of valleys over there? He said. Hallmark, said Ford. We had a look. We didn't wake you earlier, said Trillian. The last planet was knee-deep in fish. Fish? Some people like the oddest things. And before that, said Ford, we had platinum. Bit dull. We thought you'd like to see this one, though. Seas of light glared at them in one solid blaze wherever they looked. Very pretty, said Zaphod petulantly. In the sky, a huge green catalogue number appeared. It flickered and changed, and when they looked around again, so had the land. As with one voice, they all went, yuck. The sea was purple. The beach they were on was composed of tiny yellow and green pebbles, presumably very terribly precious stones. The mountains in the distance seemed soft and undulating with red peaks. Nearby stood a solid silver beach table with frilly mauve parasol and silver tassels. In the sky, a huge sign appeared, replacing the catalogue number. It said, "Whatever your tastes, Magrathea can cater for you. We are not proud." And 500 entirely naked women dropped out of the sky on parachutes. In a moment, the scene vanished and left them in a springtime meadow full of cows. Ow, said Zaphod. My brains. You want to talk about it? Said Ford. Yeah, okay, said Zaphod, and all three sat down and ignored the scenes that came and went around them. I figure this, said Zaphod. Whatever happened to my mind, I did it, and I did it in such a way that it wouldn't be detected by the government screening tests. And I wasn't to know anything about it myself. Pretty crazy, right? The other two nodded in agreement. So I reckon, what's so secret I can't let anybody know I know it? Not the galactic government, not even myself. And the answer is I don't know, obviously. But I put a few things together and I can begin to guess. When did I decide to run for president? Shortly after the death of President Uden Vranks. You remember Uden, Ford? Yeah, said Ford. He was that guy we met when we were kids, the Arcturian captain. He was a gas. He gave us conkers when you bust your way into his mega freighter. Said you were the most amazing kid he'd ever met. What's all this? Said Trillian. Ancient history, said Ford. When we were kids together on Beetlejuice, the Arcturian mega freighters used to carry most of the bulky trade between Galactic Center and the outlying regions. The Beetlejuice trading scouts used to find the markets, and the Arcturians would supply them. There was a lot of trouble with space pirates before they were wiped out in the Dordelis Wars, and the megafreighters had to be equipped with the most fantastic defense shields known to galactic science. They were real brutes of ships, and huge. In orbit around a planet, they would eclipse the sun. One day, young Zaphod here decides to raid one, on a tri-jet scooter designed for stratosphere work, a mere kid. I mean, forget it was crazier than a mad monkey. I went along for the ride because I'd got some very safe money on him not doing it, and I didn't want him coming back with fake evidence. So what happens? We got in his tri-jet, which he had souped up something totally other, crossed 3 parsecs in a matter of weeks, bust our way onto a mega freighter, I still don't know how, marched onto the bridge waving toy pistols and demanded conkers. A wilder thing I have not yet known. Lost me a year's pocket money. For what? Conkers. The captain was this really amazing guy, Uden Vranks, said Zaphod. He gave us food, booze, stuff from really weird parts of the galaxy. Lots of conkers, of course. We had the most incredible time. Then he teleported us back into the maximum security wing of the Beetlejuice State Prison. He was a cool guy. Went on to become president of the galaxy. Zaphod paused. The scene around them was currently plunged into gloom. Dark mists swirled around them, and elephantine shapes lurked indistinctly in the shadows. The air was occasionally rent with the sounds of illusory beings murdering other illusory beings. Presumably enough people must have liked this sort of thing to make it a paying proposition. Ford, said Zaphod quietly. Yeah? Just before Uden died, he came to see me. What? You never told me. No. What did he say? What did he come to see you about? He told me about the Heart of Gold. It was his idea that I should steal it. His idea? Yeah, said Zaphod. And the only possible way of stealing it was to be at the launching ceremony. Ford gaped at him in astonishment for the moment, and then roared with laughter. Are you telling me, he said, that you set yourself up to become president of the galaxy just to steal that ship? That's it, said Zaphod with the sort of grin that would get most people locked away in a room with soft walls. But why? Said Zaphod. What's so important about it? Dunno, said Zaphod. I think if I'd consciously known what was so important about it and what I would need it for, it would have showed up on the brain screening tests. I would have never have passed. I think Uden told me a lot of things that are still locked away. So you think you went and mucked about inside your own brain as a result of Uden talking to you? He was a hell of a talker. Yeah, but Zaphod, old mate, you want to look after yourself, you know? Zaphod shrugged. I mean, don't you have any inkling for the reasons for all this? Asked Ford. Zaphod thought hard about this, and doubts seemed to cross his mind. No, he said at last. I don't seem to be letting myself into any of my secrets. Still, he added on further reflection, I can understand that. I wouldn't trust myself further than I could spit a rat. A moment later, the last planet in the catalogue vanished from beneath them, and the solid world resolved itself again. They were sitting in a plush waiting room full of glass-topped tables and design awards. A tall Magrathian man was standing in front of them. The mice will see you now, he said. Chapter 30. So there you have it, said Slarty Bartfast, making a feeble and perfunctory attempt to clear some of the appalling mess of his study. He picked up a paper from the top of a pile, but then couldn't think of anywhere else to put it, so he put it back down top of the original pile, which promptly fell over. Which happens to me a lot too, actually. He thought designed the Earth, we built it, and you lived on it. And the Vogons came and destroyed it 5 minutes before the programme was completed. Added Arthur, not unbitterly. Yes, said the old man, pausing to gaze hopelessly around the room. 10 million years of planning and work gone just like that. 10 million years, Earthman. Can you conceive of that kind of time span? A galactic civilization could grow from a single worm 5 times over in that time. Gone. He paused. Well, that's bureaucracy for you, he added. You know, said Arthur thoughtfully, all this explains a lot of things. All through my life I've had this strange, unaccountable feeling that something was going on in the world. Something big, even sinister, and no one would tell me what it was. No, said the old man. That's just perfectly normal paranoia. Everyone in the universe has that. Everyone? Said Arthur. Well, if everyone has it, perhaps that means something. Perhaps somewhere outside the universe we know... Maybe. Who cares? Said Slarty Bartfast before Arthur got too excited. Perhaps I'm old and tired, he continued, but I always think that the chances of finding out what is really going on are so absurdly remote that the only thing to do is, say, hang the sense of it and just keep yourself occupied. Look at me. I designed coastlines. I got an award for Norway. He rummaged around a pile of debris and pulled out a large perspex block with his name on it and a model of Norway moulded into it. Where's the sense in that? He said. None that I've been able to make out. I've been doing fjords all my life. For a fleeting moment they became fashionable and I get a major award. He turned it over in his hands with a shrug and tossed it aside, carelessly, but not so carelessly that it didn't land on something soft. In this replacement Earth we're building, they've given me Africa to do, and of course I'm doing it with all fjords again because I happen to like them, and I'm old-fashioned enough to think they give a lovely Baroque feel to a continent. And they tell me it's not equatorial enough. Equatorial! He gave a hollow laugh. What does it matter? Science has achieved some wonderful things, of course, but I'd far rather be happy than right any day. And are you? No, that's where it all falls down, of course. Pity, said Arthur with sympathy. It sounded like quite a good lifestyle otherwise. Somewhere on the wall a small white light flashed. Come, said Slarty Bartfast. You are to meet the mice. Your arrival on the planet has caused considerable excitement. It has already been hailed, so I gather, as the third most improbable event in the history of the universe. What were the first two? Oh, probably just coincidences, said Slarty Bartfast carelessly. He opened the door and stood waiting for Arthur to follow. Arthur glanced around him once more and then down at himself, at the sweaty, dishevelled clothes he'd been lying in the mud in on Thursday morning. I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, he muttered to himself. I beg your pardon, said the old man mildly. Oh, nothing, said Arthur, only joking. Chapter 31. It is of course well known that careless talk costs lives, but the full scale of the problem is not always appreciated. For instance, at the very moment that Arthur said, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, a freak wormhole opened up in the fabric of the space-time continuum and carried his words far, far back in time across almost infinite reaches of space to a distant galaxy where strange and warlike beings were poised on the brink of frightful interstellar battle. The two opposing leaders were meeting for the last time. A dreadful silence fell across the conference table as the commander of the Valurgs, resplendent in his black jewelled battle shorts, gazed levelly at the Gugvant leader, squatting opposite him in a cloud of green, sweet-smelling steam, and, with a million sleek and horrible beweaponed starcruisers poised to unleash electric death at his single word of command, challenged the vile creature to take back what he had said about his mother. The creature stirred in his sickly, broiling vapour, and at that very moment the words, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, drifted across the conference table. Unfortunately, in the Valurg tongue, this was the most dreadful insult imaginable, and there was nothing for it but to wage terrible war for centuries. Eventually, of course, after their galaxy had been decimated over a few thousand years, it was realised that the whole thing had been a ghastly mistake, and so the two opposing battle fleets settled their few remaining differences in order to launch a joint attack on our own galaxy, now positively identified as the source of the offending remark. For thousands more years, the mighty ships tore across the empty wastes of space and finally dived screaming onto the first planet they came across, which happened to be the Earth, where, due to a terrible miscalculation of scale, the entire battle fleet was accidentally swallowed by a small dog. Those who study the complex interplay of cause and effect in the history of the universe say this sort of thing is going on all the time, but that we are just powerless to prevent it. It's just life, they say. A short aircar trip brought Arthur and the old Magrathian to a doorway. They left the car and went through the doors into a waiting room full of glass-topped tables and perspex awards. Almost immediately, a light flashed above the door on the other side of the room, and they entered. Arthur, you're safe, a voice cried. Am I? Said Arthur, rather startled. Oh, good. The lighting was rather subdued, and it took him a moment or so to see Ford, Trillian and Zaphod sitting around a large table, beautifully decked out with exotic dishes, strange sweetmeats and bizarre fruits. They were stuffing their faces. What happened to you? Demanded Arthur. Well, said Zaphod, attacking a boneful of grilled muscle. Our hosts here have been gassing us and zapping our minds and being generally weird, and have now given us a rather nice meal to make it up to us. Here, he said, hoiking out a lump of evil-smelling meat from a bowl. Have some vegan rhino's cutlet. It's delicious if you happen to like that sort of thing. Hosts, said Arthur. What hosts? I don't see any. A small voice said, Welcome to lunch, Earth creature. Arthur glanced around and suddenly yelped. Ugh, he said. There are mice on the table. There was an awkward silence as everyone looked pointedly at Arthur. He was busy staring at the two white mice sitting on what looked like whiskey glasses on the table. He heard the silence and glanced around at everyone. "Oh," he said with sudden realization. "Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't quite prepared for..." "Let me introduce you," said Trillian. "Arthur, this is Benji Mouse." "Hi," said one of the mice. His whiskers stroked what must have been a touch-sensitive panel on the inside of the whiskey glass, like affair, and it moved forward slightly. "And this is Frankie Mouse," the other mouse said. "Pleased to meet you," and did likewise. Arthur gaped. "But aren't they..." "Yes," said Trillian. "They are the mice I brought with me from the Earth." She looked him in the eye, and Arthur thought he detected the tiniest resigned shrug. She looked... "Could you pass me that bowl of grated Arcturan megadonkey?" she said. Slarty Bartfast coughed politely. Excuse me," he said. "Yes, thank you, Slarty Bartfast," said Benji Mouse sharply. "You may go." "What? Oh, very well," said the old man, slightly taken aback. "I'll just go and get on with some of my fjords then." Well, that in fact won't be necessary," said Frankie Mouse. "It looks very much as if we won't be needing the new Earth any longer." He swiveled his pink little eyes. "Not now that we have found a native of the planet who was there seconds before it was destroyed." "What?" cried Slarty Bartfast, aghast. "You can't mean that! I've got 1,000 glaciers poised and ready to roll over Africa." "Well, perhaps you can take them on a quick skiing holiday before you dismantle them," said Frankie acidly. "Skiing holiday?" cried the old man. "Those glaciers are works of art! Elegantly sculptured contours, soaring pinnacles of ice, deep, majestic ravines. It would be sacrilege to go skiing on high art." "Thank you, Slarty Bartfast," said Benji firmly. "That will be all." "Yes, sir," said the old man coldly. "Thank you very much. Well, goodbye, Earthman," he said to Arthur. "Hope the lifestyle comes together." With a brief nod to the rest of the company, he turned and walked sadly out of the room. I feel really bad for him. Arthur stared after him, not knowing what to say. "Now," said Benji Mouse, "to business." Ford and Zaphod clinked their glasses together. "To business," they said. "I beg your pardon," said Benji. Ford looked around. "Sorry, I thought you were proposing a toast," he said. The two mice scuttled impatiently around in their glass transports. Finally, they composed themselves, and Benji moved forward to address Arthur. "Now, Earth creature," he said, "the situation we have in effect is this. We have, as you know, been more or less running your planet for the last 10 million years in order to find this wretched thing called the ultimate question." "Why?" said Arthur sharply. "No, we already thought of that one," said Frankie, interrupting. "But it doesn't fit the answer. Why 42? You see, it doesn't work." "No," said Arthur. "I mean, why have you been doing it?" "Oh, I see," said Frankie. "Well, eventually just habit, I think, to be brutally honest. And this is more or less the point. We're sick to the teeth with the whole thing. And the prospect of doing it all over again on account of those win-it-ridden Vogons quite frankly gives me the screaming heebie-jeebies, you know what I mean? It was by the merest lucky chance that Benji... Hello, Sniper Bro. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the casino. Although it's reading time at the moment. So, stick around if you like reading, I guess. But, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Turn the music down, actually. I do like the background music. Ah, no worries. I'll just continue. It was by the merest lucky chance that It was by the merest lucky chance that Benji and I finished our particular job and left the planet early for a quick holiday, and have since manipulated our way back to Magrathea by the good offices of your friends. Magrathea is a gateway to our own dimension, put in Benji. That's fine. Since when, continued his marine colleague, we have had an offer of a quite enormously fat contract to do the 5D chat show and lecture circuit back in our own dimensional neck of the woods, and we're very much inclined to take it. I would. Wouldn't you, Ford? It's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. It's one of my favourite books. I used to read it a lot. Well, my dad used to read it to me as a kid. And I just like it. It's very British. I would. Wouldn't you, Ford? Said Zaphod promptly. Oh yes, said Ford. Jump at it, like a shot. Arthur glanced at them, wondering what this was all leading up to. But we've got to have a product, you see, said Frankie. I mean, ideally, we need the ultimate question in some form or another. Zaphod leaned forward to Arthur. Yeah, I've read a couple of the FNAF books, though I think I've only read one or two. But I like the games, so I thought I'd read them anyway. But they were a lot like the old Goosebumps books that I used to read as a kid. And they were still quite fun. You see, he said, if they're just sitting over there in the studio looking very relaxed and, you know, just mentioning that they happen to know the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and then eventually have to admit it's in fact 42, then the show's probably going to be quite short. No follow-up, you see. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm quite fond of my design too. So, I had a couple people help with it. Yeah. But it's always nice to hear. We need to have something that sounds good, said Benji. Something that sounds good, exclaimed Arthur. An ultimate question that sounds good, from a couple of mice. The mice bristled. Well, I mean, yes, idealism, yes, the dignity of pure research, yes, the pursuit of truth in all its forms, but there becomes a point, I'm afraid, where you begin to suspect that if there's any real truth, it's that the entire multi-dimensional infinity of the universe is almost certainly being run by a bunch of maniacs. And if it comes to a choice between spending yet another 10 million years finding that out, and on the other hand just taking the money and running, then I, for one, could do with the exercise, said Frankie. But, said Arthur hopelessly. Hey, will you get this, Earthman? Interrupted Zaphod. You are a last generation product of that computer matrix, right? And you were there right up to the moment your planet got the finger, yeah? So your brain was an organic part of the penultimate configuration of the computer program. Oh, so your brain was an organic part of the penultimate configuration of the computer program, said Ford, rather lucidly, he thought. Right, said Zaphod. Well, said Arthur doubtfully. He wasn't aware of ever having felt an organic part of anything. He'd always seen this as one of his problems. In other words, said Benji, steering his curious little vehicle right over to Arthur, there's a good chance that the structure of the question is encoded in the structure of your brain. So we want to buy it off you. What, the question? Said Arthur. Yes, said Ford and Trillian. For lots of money, said Zaphod. No, said Frankie. It's the brain we want to buy. What? I thought you said you could just read his brain electronically, protested Ford. Oh, yes, but we'd have to take it out first. It's got to be prepared. Treated, said Benji. Diced. Thank you, shouted Arthur, tipping up his chair and backing away from the table in horror. It could always be replaced, said Benji reasonably, if you think it's important. Yes, an electronic brain, said Frankie. A simple one would suffice. A simple one, wailed Arthur. Yeah, said Zaphod with a sudden evil grin. You just have to program it to say what? And I don't understand. And where's the T? Who'd know the difference? What? Cried Arthur, backing away still further. See what I mean? Said Zaphod and howled with pain because of something that Trillian did at that moment. I'd notice the difference. No, you wouldn't, said Frankie Mouse. You'd be programmed not to. I don't know. America? It's my usual guess for most people. Ford made for the door. Look, I'm sorry, mice old lads, he said. I don't think we've got a deal. I rather think we have to have a deal, said the mice in chorus, all the charm vanishing from their piping little voices in an instant. With the tiny whining shriek, their two glass transports lifted themselves off the table and swung through the air towards Arthur, who stumbled further backwards into a blind corner, utterly unable to cope or think of anything. I don't know, I'm really bad with geography. I don't know, I can't think of any countries that begin with G. Unless it's Great Britain, but then that has like 3 names. Trillian grabbed him desperately by the arm and tried to drag him towards the door, which Ford and Zaphod were struggling to open, but Arthur was a dead weight. He seemed hypnotised by the airborne rodents swooping towards him. Oh, Germany. Okay. I should know that. I've got a friend from Germany. She screamed at him, but he just gaped. With one more yank, Ford and Zaphod got the door open. On the other side of it were a small pack of rather ugly men who they could only assume were the heavy mob of Magrathea. Not only were they ugly themselves, but the medical equipment they carried with them was also far from pretty. They charged. So, Arthur was about to have his head cut open, Trillian was unable to help him, and Ford and Zaphod were about to be set upon by several thugs a great deal heavier and more sharply armed than they were. All in all, it was extremely fortunate that at that moment every alarm on the planet burst into an ear-splitting din. Chapter 32. Emergency! Emergency! Bled the klaxons throughout Magrathea. Hostile ship has landed on planet. Armed intruders in Section 8A. Defence stations! Defence stations! The two mice sniffed irritably around the fragments of their glass transports where they lay shattered on the floor. I never thought of it that way, but you're right. Well, mine's gotten smaller because I've gotten a bigger bed. Oh well. I guess that is true, yeah. You're right. Well, I could have done with a smaller bed, but I like having my big bed. Damnation! Muttered Frankie Mouse. All that fuss over 2 pounds of earthling brain. He scuttled round and round, his pink eyes flashing, his fine white coat bristling with static. The only thing we can do now, said Benji, crouching and stroking his whiskers in thought, is to try and fake a question, invent one that will sound plausible. Difficult, said Frankie, he thought. How about what's yellow and dangerous? Benji considered this for a moment. No good, he said. Doesn't fit the answer. They sank into silence for a few seconds. All right, said Benji. What do you get if you multiply 6 by 7? No. Too literal, too factual, said Frankie. Wouldn't sustain the punter's interest. Again they thought, and Frankie said, Here's a thought. How many roads must a man walk down? Ah, said Benji. Aha, now that does sound promising. He rolled the phrase around a little. Yes, he said, that's excellent. Sounds very significant without actually trying to tie you down to any meaning. At all. How many roads must a man walk down? 42. Excellent, excellent. That'll fox 'em. Frankie baby, we are made. They performed a scampering dance in their excitement. Near them on the floor lay several rather ugly men who had been hit about the head with some heavy design awards. Half a mile away, 4 figures pounded up a corridor looking for a way out. They emerged into a wide open plan computer bay. They glanced about wildly. Which way do you reckon, Zaphod? Said Ford. At a wild guess, I'd say down here, said Zaphod, running off down to the right between a computer bank and the wall. As the others started after him, he was brought up short by a kilo-zap energy bolt that cracked through the air inches in front of him and fried a small section of adjacent wall. A voice on a loudhailer said, "Okay, Beeblebrox, hold it right there. We've got you covered." "Cops!" hissed Zaphod and span around in a crouch. "You want to try a guess at all, Ford?" "Okay, this way," said Ford, and the four of them ran down a gangway between two computer banks. At the end of the gangway appeared a heavily armoured and space-suited figure waving a vicious kilo-zap gun. "We don't want to shoot you, Beeblebrox," shouted the figure. "Suits me fine," shouted Zaphod back and dived into a wide gap between the two data process units. The others swerved in behind him. "There are two of them," said Trillian. "We're cornered." They squeezed themselves down into an angle between a large computer databank and the wall. They held their breath and waited. Suddenly, the air exploded with energy bolts as both the cops opened fire on them simultaneously. "Hey, they're shooting at us," said Arthur, crouching in a tight ball. "I thought they said they didn't want to do that." "Yeah, I thought they said that," agreed Ford. Zaphod stuck his head up for a dangerous moment. "Hey," he said, "I thought you said you didn't want to shoot us," and ducked again. They waited. After a moment, a voice replied, "It isn't easy being a cop." "Did he say?" whispered Ford in astonishment. "He said it isn't easy being a cop." "Well, surely that's his problem, isn't it?" "I'd have thought so." Ford shouted out, "Hey, listen, I think we've got enough problems on our own, having you shooting at us. So if you could avoid laying your problems on us as well, I think we'd all find it easier to cope." Another pause and then a loud hailer again. "Now see here, guy," said the voice on the loud hailer. "You're not dealing with any dumb 2-bit trigger-pumping morons with low hairlines, little piggy eyes and no conversation. We're a couple of intelligent, caring guys that you'd probably quite like if you met us socially. I don't go around gratuitously shooting people and then bragging about it afterwards in seedy Space Rangers bars like some cops I could mention. I go around shooting people gratuitously and then I agonize about it afterwards for hours to my girlfriend." "And I write novels," chimed the other cop. "Though I haven't had any of them published yet, so I'd better warn you I'm in a mean mood." Ford's eyes popped halfway out their sockets. "Who are these guys?" he said. "Dunno," said Zaphod. "I think I preferred it when they were shooting." "So are you gonna come quietly?" shouted one of the cops again. "Or are you gonna let us blast you out?" "Which would you prefer?" shouted Ford. A millisecond later, the air about them started to fry again as bolt after bolt of kilo-zap hurled itself into the computer bank in front of them. The fusillade continued for several seconds at unbearable intensity. When it stopped, there were a few seconds of near quietness as the echoes died away. "You still there?" called one of the cops. "Yes," they called back. "We didn't enjoy doing that at all," shouted the other cop. "We could tell," shouted Ford. "Now listen to this, Beeblebrox, and you better listen good." "Why?" "Why?" shouted back Zaphod. "Because," shouted the cop, "it's going to be very intelligent and quite interesting and humane." "Hello, 02. Quite interesting and humane. Now either you all give yourselves up now and let us beat you up a bit, though not very much of course, because we are firmly opposed to needless violence, or we blow up this entire planet and possibly one or two others we noticed on our way out here. Hiya, Zero. And I'll call you Zero instead then. Nice to meet you." "That's crazy," cried the Trillian. "You wouldn't do that." "Oh yes we would," shouted the cop. "Wouldn't we?" he asked the other one. "Oh yes, we'd have to, no questions," the other called back. "But why?" "Because there are some things you have to do even if you are an enlightened liberal cop who knows all about sensitivity and everything." "I just don't believe these guys," muttered Ford, shaking his head. One cop shouted to the other, "Should we shoot them again for a bit?" "Yeah, why not?" They let fly another electric barrage. "I'm Jack." and I'm reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from Douglas Adams. It's one of my favourite books as a kid. My dad used to read it to me. The heat and the noise was quite fantastic. Slowly, the computer bank was beginning to disintegrate. The front had almost all melted away, with thick rivulets of molten metal were winding their way back towards where they were squatting. They huddled further back and waited for the end. Chapter 33. But the end never came. At least not then. Quite suddenly the barrage stopped, and the sudden silence afterwards was punctuated by a couple of strangled gurgles and thuds. Yeah, I do this every Thursday. It's one of my favourite things. Just like doing a reading stream. Because it's fun, and I like doing silly voices. The four stared at each other. "What happened?" said Arthur. "They stopped," said Zaphod with a shrug. "Why?" "Dunno. Do you want to go and ask them?" "No." They waited. "Hello?" called out Ford. No answer. "That's odd. Perhaps it's a trap. They haven't the wit. What were those thuds?" "Dunno." They waited for a few more seconds. "Right," said Ford. "I'm going to have a look." "Yeah, of course I do. And bye." Well, Pan, but anyway. Yeah, and thank you. It's, like I said, it's just something I wanted to do when I started streaming, so because I like doing reading, but I thought reading actual books might be a little bit different from visual novels. Oh, well, hope you feel welcome here then. So, yeah. Nice to meet you. And I hope that, well, I know how rough it is at the moment for a lot of trans people, especially. But I hope, I think we all hope things will improve. So, but yeah, I hope while you're here you can feel comfortable, at least. And thanks for coming and thanks for following. Right, said Ford. I'm going to go have a look. He glanced around at the others. Is no one going to say, "No, you can't possibly, let me go instead"? They all shook their heads. "Oh well," he said and stood up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, after a second or so, nothing continued to happen. Ford peered through the thick smoke that was billowing out of the burning computer. Cautiously, he stepped out into the open. "I don't really have one. I've not been paying attention to HoloLive. So I can't really give my opinion on that, I'm afraid." Still nothing happened. 20 yards away, he could dimly see through the smoke, the space-suited figure of one of the cops. He was lying in a crumpled heap on the ground. "Oh, well, thanks for sticking around, and I'm glad you're feeling comfortable. That's what I tried to do. So, enjoy listening and enjoy doing whatever else you're doing in the meantime." Yeah, 20 yards away, he could dimly see through the smoke the space-suited figure of one of the cops. He was lying in a crumpled heap on the ground. 20 yards in the other direction lay the second man. No one else was anywhere to be seen. This struck Ford as extremely odd. Slowly, nervously, he walked towards the first one. The body lay reassuringly still as he approached it, and continued to lie reassuringly still as he reached it and put his foot down on the killer's app gun that still dangled from its limp fingers. He reached down and picked it up, meeting no resistance. The cop was quite clearly dead. A quick examination revealed him to be from Blagulon Kappa. He was a methane-breathing life form, dependent on his spacesuit for survival, in the thin oxygen atmosphere of Magrathea. The tiny life support system computer on his backpack appeared unexpectedly to have blown up. Ford poked around in it in considerable astonishment. These miniature suit computers usually had the full backup of the main computer back on the ship, which they were directly linked through on the sub-ether. Such a system was fail-safe in all circumstances other than total feedback malfunction, which was unheard of. He hurried over to the other prone figure and discovered that exactly the same impossible thing had happened to him, presumably simultaneously. He called the others over to look. They came, shared his astonishment, but not his curiosity. Let's get out of this hole, said Zaphod. If whatever I'm supposed to be looking for is here, I don't want it. He grabbed the second killer zap gun, blasted a perfectly harmless accounting computer, and rushed out the corridor, followed by the others. He very nearly blasted hell out of an air car that stood waiting for them a few yards away. The air car was empty, but Arthur recognised it as belonging to Slarty Bartfast. It had a note from him pinned to part of its sparse instrument panel. The note had an arrow drawn on it, pointing at one of the controls. It said, "This is probably the best button to press." Chapter 34. The air car rocketed them at speeds in excess of R17 through the steel tunnels that led out into the appalling surface of the planet, which was now in the grip of yet another dreary morning twilight. Ghastly grey lights congealed on the land. R is a velocity measure defined as a reasonable speed of travel that is consistent with health, mental well-being, and not being more than, say, 5 minutes late. It is therefore clearly an almost infinitely variable figure according to circumstances, since the first two factors vary not only with speed taken as an absolute, but also with awareness of the third factor. Unless handled with tranquility, this equation can result in considerable stress, ulcers, and even death. R17 is not a fixed velocity, but it is clearly far too fast. The air car flung itself through the air at R17 and above, deposited them next to the Heart of Gold, which stood starkly on the frozen ground like a bleached bone, and then precipitately hurled itself back in the direction whence they had come, presumably on important business of its own. Shivering, the four of them stood and looked at the ship. Beside it stood another one. It was the Blagulon Kappa police craft, a bulbous shark-like affair, slate green in colour and smothered with black stenciled letters of varying degrees of size and unfriendliness. The letters informed anyone who cared to read them as to where the ship was from, what section of the police it was assigned to, and where the power feeds should be connected. It seemed somehow unnaturally dark and silent, even for a ship whose two-man crew was at the moment lying asphyxiated in a smoke-filled chamber several miles beneath the ground. It is one of those curious things that is impossible to explain or define, but one can sense when a ship is completely dead. Ford could sense it and found it most mysterious. A ship and two policemen seemed to have gone spontaneously dead. In his experience, the universe simply didn't work like that. The other three could sense it too, but they could sense the bitter cold even more and hurried back into the Heart of Gold, suffering from an acute attack of no curiosity. Ford stayed and went to examine the Blagulon ship. As he walked, he nearly tripped over an inert steel figure lying face down in the cold dust. "Marvin!" he exclaimed. "What are you doing?" "Don't feel you have to take any notice of me, please," came a muffled drone. "But how are you, Metal Man?" said Ford. "Very depressed." "What's up?" "I don't know," said Marvin. "I've never been there." "Why?" said Ford, squatting down beside him and shivering. "Are you lying face down in the dust?" "It's a very effective way of being wretched," said Marvin. "Don't pretend you want to talk to me. I know you hate me." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do. Everybody does. It's part of the shape of the universe. I only have to talk to somebody and they begin to hate me. Even robots hate me. If you just ignore me, I expect I shall probably go away." He jacked himself up to his feet and stood resolutely facing the opposite direction. "That ship hated me," he said dejectedly, indicating the police craft. "That ship?" said Ford in sudden excitement. "What happened to it? Do you know?" "It hated me because I talked to it." "You talked to it?" exclaimed Ford. "What do you mean you talked to it?" "Simple. I got very bored and very depressed, so I went and plugged myself into its external computer feed. I talked to the computer at great length and explained my view of the universe to it, said Marvin. And what happened? Pressed Ford. It committed suicide, said Marvin, and stalked off back to the Heart of Gold. I like Marvin. Chapter 35, last chapter. That night, as the Heart of Gold was busy putting a few light years between itself and the Horsehead Nebula, Zaphod lounged under the small palm tree on the bridge, trying to bang his brain into shape with a massive pan-galactic gargle blaster. Ford and Trillian sat in a corner discussing life and the matters arising from it, and Arthur took to his bed to flip through Ford's copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Since he was going to live in the place, he reasoned, he'd better start finding out something about it. He came across this entry. It said, "The history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through three distinct and recognizable phases, those of survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases." I do, yeah. I don't give it out at the moment. Although I do have a server made, but it's not very professional or anything. It's just for me and a friend at the moment. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where shall we have lunch? I've not got any bot commands set up yet. It's something I still need to work on. But I'll probably add it to the about page at some point. But thanks for asking anyway. He got no further before the ship's intercom buzzed into life. "Hey, Earthman. You hungry, kid?" said Zaphod's voice. Yes. Well, yes, a little peckish, I suppose," said Arthur. "Okay, baby, hold tight," said Zaphod. "We'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe." And that was the end of that. The first book done. And like I said, it's one of my favourite books because I listened to the first book was the not only the one I read the most, but also the book was based off of the original radio show from the 1970s, which my dad was a big fan of. Or maybe it was 1970s. And he was a big fan of that. And I still remember all the voices that were used. And I'm trying very hard to do the voices, but obviously I'm only one person and I had an entire cast of like a lot of people. But I try and do what I can. And yeah, so it's one of my favourites because I just remember the lines really well. And a lot of them are quote for quote from the book. When speaking, anyway. Including the thing about the bowl of petunias and the whale. Which I still like. Both a falling whale going through the entire motions of suddenly existing and exploring itself in the moments up to its splatting as it hits the ground at terminal velocity. And the bowl of petunias whose only thought as it fell was, "Oh no, not again." Anyway. Oh, thank you. Well, no one's commented yet, but but even so, it's still one of my favourite things to do. I just like doing silly voices. But I'm going to have a drink just quickly, because my throat is getting dry. Okay. But thank you, Zero. Right. Okay. So, the second book. The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Chapter 1. The Story So Far. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move. Many races believe that it was created by some sort of god, though the Jetravarted people of Vittelvodel 6 believe that the entire universe was in fact sneezed out of the nose of a being called the Great Green Arkle Seizure. The Jetravartids, who live in perpetual fear of the time they call the coming of the Great White Handkerchief, are small blue creatures with more than 50 arms each, who are therefore unique in being the only race in history to have invented the aerosol deodorant before the wheel. However, the Great Green Arkle Seizure theory is not widely accepted outside of Viltvodel 6, and so the universe being the puzzling place it is, other explanations are constantly being sought. For instance, a race of hyper-intelligent pan-dimensional beings once built themselves a gigantic supercomputer called Deep Thought to calculate once and for all the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. For 7.5 million years, Deep Thought computed and calculated, and in the end announced that the answer was in fact 42. And so another, even bigger computer had to be built to find out what the actual question was. And this computer, which was called the Earth, was so large that it was frequently mistaken for a planet, especially by the strange ape-like beings who roamed its surface, totally unaware that they were simply part of a gigantic computer program. And this is very odd, because without that fairly simple and obvious piece of knowledge, nothing that ever happened on the Earth could possibly make the slightest bit of sense. Sadly, however, just before the critical moment of readout, the Earth was unexpectedly demolished by the Vogons to make way, or so they claimed, for a new hyperspace bypass, and so all hope of discovering a meaning for life was lost forever. Or so it would seem. Two of their strange, ape-like creatures evolved. Arthur Dent escaped at the very last moment because an old friend of his, Ford Prefect, suddenly turned out to be from a small planet in the vicinity of Betelgeuse, and not from Guildford as he had hitherto claimed. And more to the point, he knew how to hitch rides on flying saucers. I don't read manga, no, because maybe I could if I got like a viewer, like a manga viewer thing, which would be a better idea, but obviously I wouldn't read it out like this, but I'd need to set something up for that. But yeah, I could. So I just usually think that manga is better read when you have it in front of you and people can see pictures and stuff. Like novels, I think I'd do. No, it's never been requested. Tricia McMillan, or Trillian, had skipped the planet 6 months earlier with Zaphod Beeblebrox, the then president of the galaxy. 2 survivors. They are all that remains of the greatest experiment ever conducted to find the ultimate question and the ultimate answer of life, the universe, and everything. And, less than 500,000 miles from where their starship is drifting lazily through the inky blackness of space, a Vogon ship is moving slowly towards them. Like all Vogon ships, it looked as if it had been not so much designed as congealed. The unpleasant yellow lumps and edifices which protruded from it at unsightly angles would have disfigured the looks of most ships, but in this case that was sadly impossible. Uglier things have been spotted in the skies, but not by reliable witnesses. In fact, to see anything much uglier than a Vogon ship, you would have to go inside and look at a Vogon. If you are wise, however, this is precisely what you will avoid doing, because the average Vogon will not think twice before doing something so pointlessly hideous to you that you will wish you had never been born, or, if you are a clearer-minded thinker, that the Vogon had never been born. In fact, the average Vogon probably wouldn't even think once. They are simple-minded, thick-willed, slug-brained creatures, and thinking is not really something they are cut out for. Anatomical analysis of the Vogon reveals that its brain was originally a badly deformed, misplaced, and dyspeptic liver. The fairest thing you can say about them, then, is that they know what they like. What they like generally involves hurting people, and wherever possible, getting very angry. I like doing that. Not the hurting people bit, the getting angry bit. One thing they don't like is leaving a job unfinished. Particularly this Vogon, and particularly, for various reasons, this job. This Vogon was Captain Prostetnik Vogan Jeltz of the Galactic Hyperspace Planning Council, and he was it who had the job of demolishing the so-called planet Earth. He heaved his monumentally vile body round in his ill-fitting, slimy seat, and stared at the monitor screen on which the starship Heart of Gold was being systematically scanned. It mattered little to him that the Heart of Gold, with its infinite improbability drive, was the most beautiful and revolutionary ship ever built. Aesthetics and technology were closed books to him, and had he had his way, burnt in buried books as well. Hello! Hello, Valley. I hope I pronounced that right. Valley? Valet? Valley? Valley? It mattered even less to him that Zaphod Beeblebrox was aboard. Zaphod Beeblebrox was now the ex-president of the galaxy, and though every police force in the galaxy was currently pursuing both him and the ship he had stolen, the Vogon was not interested. He had other fish to fry. I'm reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's by Douglas Adams. It was a book made in the 1980s based on a radio show he made in the 1970s. My dad used to read it to me. It has been said that the Vogons are not above a little bribery and corruption in the same way that the sea is not above the clouds, and this was certainly true in this case. When he heard the words integrity or moral rectitude, he reached for his dictionary. Yeah, I'd have to as well. I don't know what either of those mean. And when he heard the chink of ready money in large quantities, he reached for the rulebook and threw it away. In seeking so implacably the destruction of the earth and all that therein lay, he was moving somewhat above and beyond the call of his professional duty. There was even some doubt as to whether the said bypass was actually going to be built, but the matter had been glossed over. He grunted a repellent grunt of satisfaction. "Computer," he croaked. "Get me my brain care specialist on the line." Within a few seconds, the face of Gag Halfrunt appeared on the screen, smiling the smile of a man who knew he was 10 light years away from the Vogon face he was looking at. Mixed up somewhere in the smile was a glint of irony too. Though the Vogon persistently referred to him as my private brain care specialist, there was not a lot of brain to take care of, and it was in fact Halfrunt who was employing the Vogon. He was paying him an awful lot of money to do some very dirty work. As one of the galaxy's most prominent and successful psychiatrists, he and a consortium of his colleagues were quite prepared to spend an awful lot of money when it seemed that the entire future of psychiatry might be at stake. "Well," he said, "hello, my captain of Vogon's Prostetnik, and how are we feeling today?" The Vogon captain told him that in the last hours he had wiped out nearly half his crew in a disciplinary exercise. Halfrunt's smile did not flicker for an instant. "Well," he said, "I think this is perfectly normal behavior for a Vogon, you know. The natural and healthy channeling of the aggressive instincts into acts of senseless violence." "That," rumbled the Vogon, "is what you always say." "Well, again," said Halfrunt, "I think this is perfectly normal behavior for a psychiatrist. Good. We have both clearly very well adjusted in our mental attitudes today. Now tell me, what news of the mission?" "We have located the ship." "Wonderful," said Halfrunt. "Wonderful. And the occupants?" "The Earthman is there." "Excellent. And?" "A female from the same planet. They are the last." "Good, good," beamed Halfrunt. "Who else?" "The man prefect." "Yes." "And Zaphod Beeblebrox." For an instant, Halfrunt's smile flickered. "Ah, yes," he said. "I had been expecting this. It is most regrettable." A personal friend? Inquired the Vogon, who had heard the expression somewhere once and decided to try it out. Ah, no, said Halfront. In my profession, we do not make personal friends. Grunted the Vogon. Professional detachment. No, said Halfront cheerfully. We just don't have the knack. He paused. His mouth continued to smile, but his eyes frowned slightly. But Beeblebrox, he said, he is one of my most profitable clients. He had a personality problem beyond the dreams of analysts. He toyed with this thought a little before reluctantly dismissing it. Still, he said, are you ready for your task? Yes. Good. Destroy the ship immediately. What about Beeblebrox? Well, said Halfront brightly. Zavod's just this guy, He vanished from the screen. The Vogon captain pressed the communicator button, which connected him with the remains of his crew. Attack! He said. At that precise moment, Zaphod Beeblebrox was in his cabin swearing very loudly. 2 hours ago, he had said that they would go for a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe, whereupon he had a blazing row with the ship's computer and stormed off to his cabin shouting that he would work out the improbability factors with a pencil. The Heart of Gold's improbability drive made it the most powerful, unpredictable ship in existence. There was nothing it couldn't do, provided you knew exactly how improbable it was that the thing you wanted it to do would ever happen. He had stolen it when, as president, he was meant to be launching it. He didn't know exactly why he had stolen it, except that he liked it. He didn't know why he had become president of the galaxy, except it seemed like a fun thing to be. He did know that there were better reasons than these, but that they were buried in a dark, locked-off section of his two brains. He wished the dark, locked-off section of his two brains would go away, because they occasionally surfaced momentarily and put strange thoughts into the light, fun sections of his mind and tried to deflect him from what he saw as being the basic business of his life, which was to have a wonderfully good time. At that moment, he was not having a wonderfully good time. He had run out of patience and pencils and was feeling very hungry. Starpox! He shouted. At that same precise moment, Forward Prefect was in mid-air. This was not because of anything wrong with the ship's artificial gravity field, but because he was leaping down the stairwell, which led to the ship's personal cabins. It was a very high jump to do in one bound, and he landed awkwardly, stumbled, recovered, raced down the corridor, sending a couple miniature service robots flying, skidded round the corner, burst into Zaphod's door, and explained what was on his mind. Vogons! He said. A short while before this, Arthur Dent had set out from his cabin in search of a cup of tea. It was not a quest he embarked upon with a great deal of optimism, because he knew that the only source of hot drinks on the entire ship was a benighted piece of equipment produced by the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation. It was called a Nutrimatic Drink Synthesizer, and he had encountered it before. It claimed to produce the widest possible range of drinks personally matched to the tastes and metabolism of whoever cared to use it. When put to the test, however, it invariably produced a plastic cup filled with a liquid that was almost, but not quite, entirely unlike tea. He attempted to reason with the thing. Tea, he said. Share and enjoy, the machine replied, and provided him with yet another cup of the sickly liquid. He threw it away. Share and enjoy, the machine repeated, and provided him with another one. Hey again, Sniper. Share and enjoy is the company motto of the hugely successful Sirius Cybernetics Corporation Complaints Division, which now covers the major land masses of the 3 medium-sized planets, and is the only part of the corporation to have shown a consistent profit in recent years. The motto stands, or rather stood, in 3-mile-high illuminated letters near the Complaints Department spaceport on Edrax. Unfortunately, its weight was such that shortly after it was erected, the ground beneath the letters caved in and they dropped for nearly half their length through the offices of many talented young complaints executives now deceased. The protruding upper halves of the letters now appear, in the local language, to read, "Go stick your head in a pig," and are no longer illuminated except at times of special celebration. Arthur threw away a sixth cup of the liquid. "Listen, you machine," he said. "You claim you can synthesize any drink in existence, so why do you keep giving me the same undrinkable stuff?" "I don't know how to help with your Wi-Fi. Sounds like an issue you gotta sort out." "Nutrition and pleasurable sense data," burbled the machine. "Share and enjoy." "It tastes filthy." "If you have enjoyed the experience of this drink," continued the machine, "why not share it with your friends?" "Because," said Arthur tartly, "I want to keep them. Will you try to comprehend what I'm telling you? That drink," said the machine sweetly, "was individually tailored to meet your personal requirements for nutrition and pleasure." "Ah," said Arthur, "so I'm on a masochist on a diet, am I?" "Share and enjoy." "Oh, shut up." "Will that be all?" Arthur decided to give up. "Yes," he said. Then he decided he'd be damned if he'd give up. "No," he said. "Look, it's very, very simple. All I want is a cup of tea. You are going to make one for me. Keep quiet and listen." And he sat. He told the Nutramatic about India. He told it about China. He told it about Ceylon. He told it about broad leaves drying in the sun. He told it about silver teapots. He told it about summer afternoons on the lawn. He told it about putting in the milk before the tea so it wouldn't get scalded. I don't do that. I should do that. I always put the tea in first. He even told it, briefly, about the history of the East India Company. "So that is it, is it?" said the Nutramatic when he had finished. "Yes," said Arthur, "that is what I want." "You want the taste of dried leaves boiled in water?" Yes, with milk." "Squirted out of a cow?" "Well, in a manner of speaking, I suppose." "I'm going to need some help with this one," said the machine tersely. All the cheerful burbling had dropped out of its voice, and it now meant business. "Well, anything I can do," said Arthur. "You've done quite enough," the Nutramatic informed him. It summoned the ship's computer. "Hi there," said the ship's computer. The Nutramatic explained to the tea about the ship's computer. The computer boggled, linked logic circuits with the Nutramatic, and together they lapsed into a grim silence. Arthur watched and waited for a while, but nothing further happened. He thumped it, but still nothing happened. Eventually he gave up and wandered to the bridge. In the empty wastes of space, the heart of gold hung still. Around it blazed the billion pinpricks of the galaxy. Towards it crept the ugly yellow lump of the Vogon ship. Chapter 3. "Does anyone have a kettle?" Arthur asked as he walked onto the bridge, and instantly began to wonder why Trillian was yelling at the computer to talk to her. Ford was thumping it, and Zaphod was kicking it, and also, why was there a nasty yellow lump on the vision screen? He put down the empty cup he was carrying and walked over to them. "Hello," he said. At that moment, Zaphod flung himself over to the polished marble surfaces that contained the instruments that controlled the conventional photon drive. They materialised beneath his hands, and he flipped over to manual control. He pushed, he pulled, he pressed, and he swore. The photon drive gave a sickly judder and cut out again. "Something up?" said Arthur. "Hey, did you hear that?" muttered Zaphod as he leapt for the manual controls of the infinite improbability drive. "The monkey spoke." The improbability drive gave two small whines and then also cut out. "Pure history, man," said Zaphod, kicking the improbability drive. "A talking monkey." "If you're upset about something," said Arthur. "Vogons!" snapped Ford. "We're under attack!" Arthur gibbered. "Well, what are you doing? Let's get out of here." "Can't. Computer's jammed." "Jammed? It says all the circuits are occupied. There's no power anywhere in the ship." Ford moved away from the computer terminal, wiped a sleeve across his forehead, and slumped back against the wall. "Nothing we can do," he said. He glared at nothing and bit his lip. When Arthur had been a boy at school, Long before Earth had been demolished, he had used to play football. He had not been at all good at it, and his particular specialty had been scoring own goals in important matches. Whenever this happened, he used to experience a peculiar tingling around the back of his neck that would slowly creep up across his cheeks and heat his brow. The image of mud and grass and lots of little jeering boys flinging it at him suddenly became vivid to his mind at this moment. A peculiar tingling sensation at the back of his neck was creeping up across his cheeks and heating his brow. He started to speak and stopped. He started to speak again and stopped again. Finally, he managed to speak. He said. He cleared his throat. Tell me, he continued, and said it so nervously that the others all turned to stare at him. He glanced at the approaching yellow blob on the vision screen. Tell me, he said again, did the computer say what was occupying it? I just ask out of interest. Their eyes were riveted on him. And, well, that's it really. Just asking. Zaphod put out a hand and held Arthur by the scruff of the neck. What have you done to it, monkey man? He breathed. Well, said Arthur, nothing. In fact, it's just, I think a short while ago I was trying to work out how to... Yes? Make me some tea. That's right, guys, the computer sang out suddenly. Just coping with that problem right now. And wow, it's a biggie. Be with you in a while. It lapsed back into silence. That was only matched, for sheer intensity, by the tense silence of the three people staring at Arthur Dent. As if to relieve the tension, the Vogons chose that moment to start firing. The ship shook, the ship thundered. Outside, the inch-thick force field around it blistered, crackled and spat under the barrage of a dozen 30 MHz definite kill photoraison cannon, and looked as if it wouldn't be around for long. 4 minutes is how Ford Prefect gave it. How long Ford Prefect gave it. Oh, take care, Zero. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening. Have a good day. Bye. "3 minutes and 50 seconds, he said a short while later. 45 seconds, he added at the appropriate time. He flicked idly at some useless switches, then gave Arthur an unfriendly look. Dying for a cup of tea, eh? He said. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Will you stop counting? Snarled Zaphod. Yes, said Ford Prefect. In 3 minutes and 35 seconds. Aboard the Vogon ship, Prostetnik Vogon Jeltz was puzzled. He had expected a chase. He had expected an exciting grapple with tractor beams. He had expected to have to use the specially installed subsilic normality Assertitron to counter the Heart of Gold's infinite improbability drive, but the subsilic normality Assertitron lay idle as the Heart of Gold just sat there and took it. A dozen 30 MHz Definikill photoraison cannon continued to blaze away at the Heart of Gold, and still it just sat there and took it. He tested every sensor at his disposal to see if there was any subtle trickery afoot, but no subtle trickery was to be found. He didn't know about the tea, of course. Nor did he know exactly how the occupants of the Heart of Gold were spending the last 3 minutes and 35 seconds of their life they had left to spend. Quite how Zaphod Beeblebrox arrived at the idea of holding a séance at this point is something he was never quite clear on. Obviously, the subject of death was in the air, but more as something to be avoided than harped upon. Possibly the horror that Zaphod experienced at the prospect of being reunited with his deceased relatives led on to the thought that they might just feel the same way about him, and what's more, be able to do something about helping to postpone this reunion. Or again, it might have just been that one of the strange promptings that occasionally surfaced from that dark area of his mind that he had inexplicably locked off prior to becoming President of the Galaxy. You want to talk to your great-grandfather? Boggled Ford. Yeah. Does it have to be now? The ship continued to shake and thunder. The temperature was rising. The light was getting dimmer. All the energy the computer didn't require for thinking about tea was being pumped into the rapidly fading force field. Yeah, insisted Zaphod. Listen, Ford, I think you may be able to help us. Are you sure you mean think? Pick your words with care. Suggest something else we can do. Well, okay, round the central console. Now, come on, Trillian. Monkey Man, move. They clustered around the central console in confusion, sat down, and, feeling exceptionally foolish, held hands. With his third hand, Zaphod turned off the lights. Darkness gripped the ship. Outside, the thunderous roar of the definite kill cannon continued to rip at the force field. Concentrate, hissed Zaphod, on his name. What is it? Asked Arthur. Zaphod Beeblebrox IV. What? Zaphod Beeblebrox IV. Concentrate. The fourth? Yeah. Listen, I'm Zaphod Beeblebrox. My father was Zaphod Beeblebrox II. My grandfather, Zaphod Beeblebrox III. What? There was an accident with a contraceptive in a time machine. Now concentrate. 3 minutes, said Ford Prefect. Why, said Arthur Dent, are we doing this? Shut up, suggested Zaphod Beeblebrox. Trillian said nothing. What, she thought, was there to say? The only light on the bridge came from 2 dim red triangles in the far corner where Marvin the paranoid android sat slumped, ignoring his all and ignored by all, in a private and rather unpleasant world of his own. Round the central console, 4 figures hunched in tight concentration, trying to block from their minds the terrifying shuddering of the ship and the fearful roar that echoed through it. They concentrated. Still they concentrated. And still they concentrated. The seconds ticked by. On Zaphod's brow stood beads of sweat, first of concentration, then of frustration, and finally of embarrassment. At last he let out a cry of anger, snatched back his hands from Trillian and Ford, and stabbed at the light switch. Ah, I was beginning to think you'd never turn the lights on, said a voice. No, not too bright, please. My eyes aren't what they once were. 4 figures jolted upright in their seats. Slowly, they turned their heads to look, though their scalps showed a distinct propensity to try and stay in the same place. Now, who disturbs me at this time? Said the small, bent, gaunt figure standing by the sprays of fern at the far end of the bridge. His 2 small, wispy-haired heads looked so ancient that it seemed they might hold dim memories of the birth of the galaxies themselves. One lolled in sleep, but the other squinted sharply at them. If his eyes weren't what they once were, they must have once been diamond cutters. Zaphod stuttered nervously for a moment. He gave the intricate little double nod, which is the traditional Beetlejuicean gesture of familial respect. Oh, hi, Great-Granddad, he breathed. A little old figure moved closer toward them. He peered through the dim light. He thrust out a bony finger at his great-grandson. Ah, he snapped. Zaphod Beeblebrox, the last of our great line. Zaphod Beeblebrox the Nothingth. The first. The Nothingth, spat the figure. Zaphod hated his voice. It always seemed to him like to screech like fingernails across the blackboard of what he liked to think of as his soul. He shifted awkwardly in his seat. Yeah, he muttered. Look, I'm really sorry about the flowers. I mean, I meant to send them along, but, you know, the shop was fresh out of wreaths and... You forgot, snapped Zaphod Beeblebrox IV. Well, too busy. Never think of other people. The living are all the same. 2 minutes, Zaphod, whispered Ford in an awed whisper. Zaphod fidgeted nervously. Yeah, but I did mean to send them, he said, and I'll write to my great-grandmother as well, just as soon as we get out of this. Your great-grandmother, mused the gaunt little figure to himself. Yeah, said Zaphod. How is she? Tell you what, I'll go see her, but first we've got to... Your late great-grandmother and I are very well, rasped Zaphod Beeblebrox IV. Ah. Oh. But very disappointed in you, young Zaphod. Yeah, well, Zaphod felt strangely powerless to take charge of this conversation, and Ford's heavy breathing at his side told him that the seconds were ticking away fast. The noise and the shaking had reached terrifying proportions. He saw Trilly and Arthur's faces, white and unblinking in the gloom.
Great-grandfather, we've been following your progress with considerable despondency.
Yeah, look, just at the moment, you see.
Not to say contempt.
Hello, Mason. Could you sort of listen for a moment?
I mean, what exactly are you doing with your life?
I'm being attacked by a Vogon fleet, cried Zaphod. It was an exaggeration, but it was on his only opportunity so far of getting the basic point of the exercise across. Oh, thank you for the follow, Mason. Hope you enjoy your time here. I'm just reading at the moment.
Doesn't surprise me in the least,
said the little old figure with a shrug. Oh, it's happening right now, you see, insisted Zaphod feverishly. The spectral ancestor nodded, picked up the cup Arthur Dent had brought in and looked at it with interest.
Great-granddad, did you know, interrupting the ghostly figure, fixing Zaphod with a stern look, the Betelgeuse 5 has developed a very slight eccentricity in its orbit.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm trying my best. Zaphod didn't, and found the information hard to concentrate on, what with all the noise and imminence of death, and so on.
No, look, he said. Me spinning in my grave, barked the ancestor.
He slammed the cup down and pointed a quivering, stick-like see-through finger at Zaphod.
Your fault,
he screeched. 1 minute 30, muttered Zaphod, his head in his hands.
Yeah, look, Great-Granddad, can you actually help because...
Help! Exclaimed the old man as if he'd been asked for a stoat.
Yeah, help, and like now, because otherwise...
Help! Repeated the old man, as if he'd been asked for a lightly grilled stoat in a bun with French fries. He stood amazed.
You go swanning your way around the galaxy with your...
The ancestor waved a contemptuous hand.
With your disreputable friends, too busy to put flowers on my grave. Plastic ones would have been quite appropriate from you, but no, too busy, too modern, too skeptical, till you suddenly find yourself in a bit of a fix and come over suddenly all astrally minded.
He shook his head, carefully so as not to disturb the slumber of the other one, which was already becoming restive.
Well, I don't know, young Zaphod, he continued. I think I'll have to think about this one.
1 minute 10, said Ford hollowly. Zaphod Beeblebrox IV peered at him curiously.
Why does that man keep talking in numbers? He said.
Those numbers, said Zaphod tersely, are the time we've got left to live.
Oh.
Thank you, Croissant. Enjoy your time here. The casino is currently closed for reading, but hopefully it'll open again soon. And thanks for joining, and thanks for the follow.
Oh,
said his great-grandfather. He grunted to himself.
Doesn't apply to me, of course,
he said, and moved off to a dimmer recess of the bridge in search of something else to poke around at. Zaphod felt he was teetering on the edge of madness and wondered if he shouldn't just jump over and have done with it.
Great-grandfather, he said, it applies to us. We're still alive, and we're just about to lose our lives. Good job, too.
What?
What use is your life to anyone? When I think of what you've made of it, the phrase pig's ear comes irresistibly to my mind.
But I was president of the galaxy, man.
Huh, muttered his ancestor. And what kind of job is that for a Beeblebrox?
Hey, what? Only president, you know? Of the whole galaxy.
Conceited little mega puppy.
Zaphod blinked in bewilderment. Hey, What are you at, man? I mean, great-grandfather? The hunched-up little figure stalked up to his great-grandson and tapped him sternly on the knee. This had the effect of reminding Zaphod that he was talking to a ghost because he didn't feel a thing.
You know and I know what being president means, young Zaphod. You know because you've been it, and I know because I'm dead, and it gives one such a wonderfully uncluttered perspective. We have a saying up here, life is wasted on the living.
Yeah, said Zaphod bitterly. Very good, very deep. Right now I need aphorisms like I need holes in my heads. 50 seconds, grunted Ford Prefect.
Where was I?
Said Zaphod Beeblebrox the Fourth. Pontificating, said Zaphod Beeblebrox.
Oh yes.
Can this guy, muttered Ford quietly to Zaphod, actually in fact help us? Nobody else can, whispered Zaphod. Ford nodded despondently.
Zaphod, the ghost was saying, you became president of the galaxy for a reason. Have you forgotten?
Could we go into this later?
Have you forgotten?
Insisted the ghost.
Yeah, of course I forgot. I had to forget. They screen your brain when you get the job, you know? If they'd found my head full of tricksy ideas, I'd been right out on the streets again with nothing but a fat pension, secretarial staff, a fleet of ships, and a couple of slit throats.
Ah, nodded the ghost in satisfaction.
Then you do remember.
He paused for a moment.
Good,
he said, and the noise stopped. 48 seconds, said Ford. He looked up again at his watch and tapped it. He looked up. Hey, the noise has stopped. A mischievous twinkle gleamed in the ghost's hard little eyes.
I've slowed down time for a moment, he said. Just for a moment, you understand. I would hate you all to miss what I have to say.
No, you listen to me, you see-through old bat, said Zaphod, leaping out of his chair.
A, thanks for stopping time and all that. Great, terrific, wonderful. But B, no thanks for the homily, right? I don't know what thing I'm meant to be doing is, and it looks to me as if I was supposed not to know. And I resent that, right?
The old me knew. The old me cared. Fine, so far so hoopy. Except that the old me cared so much he actually got inside his own brain, my own brain, and locked off the bits he knew and cared about. Because if I knew and cared, I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to go and be president. I wouldn't be able to go and steal this ship, which must be the important thing. But this former self of mine killed himself off, didn't he? By changing my brain. Okay, that was his choice. This new me has its own choices to make, and by a strange coincidence, those choices involve not knowing and not caring about this big number, whatever it is. That's what he wanted. That's what he got. Except this old self of mine tried to leave himself in control, leaving orders for me in the bit of my brain he locked off. Well, I don't want to know, and I don't want to hear them. That's my choice. I'm not going to be anybody's puppet, particularly not my own. Zaphod banged the console in fury, oblivious to the dumbfounded looks he was attracting. The old me is dead, he raved. Killed himself. The dead shouldn't hang about trying to interfere with the living.
And yet you summoned me up to help you out of a scrape, said the ghost.
Ah, said Zaphod, sitting down again. Well, that's different, isn't it? He grinned at Trillian weakly.
Zaphod,
rasped the apparition.
I think the only reason I waste my breath on you is that being dead, I don't have any other use for it.
Okay, said Zaphod. Why don't you tell me what the big secret is? Try me.
Zaphod, you knew when you were president of the galaxy, as did Uden Vranks before you, that the president is nothing, a cipher. Somewhere in the shadows behind is another man, being, something, with ultimate power. That man, or being, is something you must find, the man who controls this galaxy, and we suspect others, possibly the entire universe.
Oh, thanks for joining, Betty. Nice to see you. Welcome to the casino. It's currently closed for reading day.
Why? Why? Exclaimed an astonished ghost. Why? Look around you, lad. Does it look to you as if it's in good hands?
It's all right. The old ghost glowered at him. Give me a second.
I will not argue with you. You will simply take this ship, this improbability drive ship, to where it is needed. You will do it. Don't think you can escape your purpose. The improbability field controls you. You're in its grip. What's this?
He was standing, tapping at one of the terminals of Eddie the shipboard computer. Zaphod told him.
What's it doing?
I'm glad. It's one of my favourite books.
It's trying,
said Zaphod with wonderful restraint,
to make tea. Good, said his great-grandfather. I approve of that. Now, Zaphod, he said, turning and wagging a finger at him, I don't know if you are really capable of succeeding in your job. I think you will not be able to avoid it. However, I am too long dead and too tired to care as much as I did. The principal reason I am helping you now is that I couldn't bear the thought of you and your modern friends slouching about up here. Understood?
Yeah, thanks a bundle.
Oh, and Zaphod?
Yeah.
If you ever find you need help again, you know, if you're in trouble, need a hand out of a tight corner.
Yeah?
Please don't hesitate to get lost.
Within a space of 1 second, a bolt of light flashed from the wizened old ghost's hands to the computer. The ghost vanished, the bridge filled with a billowing smoke, and the heart of gold leapt an unknown distance through the dimensions of space and time. Chapter 4. 10 light-years away, Gag Halfront jacked up his smile by several notches. As he watched the picture on the vision screen, relayed across the sub-ether from the bridge of the Vogon ship, he saw the final shreds of the Heart of Gold's force field ripped away, and the ship itself vanish in a puff of smoke. Good, he thought. The end of the last stray survivors of the demolition he had ordered on the planet Earth, he thought. The final end of this dangerous to the psychiatric profession, and subversive also to the psychiatric profession, experiment to find the question to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. He thought. There would be some celebration with his fellows tonight, and in the morning they would meet again in their unhappy, bewildered, and highly profitable patience, secure in the knowledge that the meaning of life would not now be, once and for all, well and truly sorted out, he thought. Family's always embarrassing, isn't it? Said Ford to Zaphod as the smoke began to clear. He paused and then looked about. Where's Zaphod? He said. Arthur and Trillian looked about blankly. They were pale and shaken and didn't know where Zaphod was. Marvin, said Ford. Where's Zaphod? A moment later, he said, Where's Marvin? The robot's corner was empty. The ship was utterly silent. It lay in thick black space. Occasionally it rocked and swayed. Every instrument was dead. Every vision screen was dead. They consulted the computer. It said, I regret that I have been temporarily closed to all communication. Meanwhile, here is some light music. They turned off the light music. They searched every corner of the ship in increasing bewilderment and alarm. Everywhere was dead and silent. Nowhere was there any trace of Zaphod or Marvin. One of the last areas they checked was the small bay in which the Nutramatic machine was located. On the delivery plate of the Nutramatic drink synthesizer was a small tray on which sat 3 bone china cups and saucers, a bone china jug of milk, a silver teapot saying full of the best tea Arthur had ever tasted, and a small printed note saying, wait. Okay, Mason, well thank you for joining, and take care. I appreciate you being here. So have a good day, and take care. Bye for now. Yeah. A bone china jug full of milk and a silver teapot full of the best tea Arthur had ever tasted, and a small printed note saying, wait. Chapter 5. Ursa Minor Beta is, some say, one of the most appalling places in the known universe. Although it is excruciatingly rich, horrifyingly sunny, and more full of wonderfully exciting people than a pomegranate is of pips, it can hardly be insignificant. that when a recent edition of Playbeing magazine headlined an article with the words, "When you are tired of Ursa Minor Beta, you are tired of life," the suicide rate quadrupled overnight. I hope your Wi-Fi is back now, and you've sorted out whatever was wrong with it. Good. Not that there were any nights on Ursa Minor Beta. It is a West Zone planet which, by an inexplicable and somewhat suspicious freak of topography, consists almost entirely of subtropical coastline. By an equally suspicious freak of temporal relatistics, it is nearly always Saturday afternoon, just before the beach bars close. No adequate explanation for this has been forthcoming from the dominant life forms of Ursa Minor Beta, who spend most of their time attempting to achieve spiritual enlightenment by running around swimming pools and inviting investigation officials form the Galactic Geotemporal Control Board to have a nice diurnal anomaly. Diurnal. I think that means nighttime. Diurnal? I think it's diurnal. There is only one city on Ursa Minor Beta, and that is only called a city because the swimming pools are slightly thicker on the ground than there are elsewhere. Well, enjoy your bread. I've already eaten tonight. But what kind of bread? If you approach Light City by air, and there is no other way of approaching it, no roads, no port facilities. If you don't fly, they don't want to see you in Light City. You will see why it has this name. Here the sun shines brightest of all, glittering on the swimming pools, shimmering on the white palm-lined boulevards, glistening on the healthy bronzed specks moving up and down them, gleaming off the villas, the hazy air pads, the beach bars and so on. Most particularly, it shines on a building, a tall beautiful building consisting of two 30-storey towers, white towers, connected by a bridge halfway up their length. Well, I hope you don't choke on your bread then. You don't want to die. It's not healthy for anyone. The building is the home of a book and was built here on the proceeds of an extraordinary copyright lawsuit fought between the book's editors and a breakfast cereal company. The book is a guidebook, a travel book. It is one of the most remarkable, certainly the most successful books ever to come out of the great publishing corporations of Ursa Minor. More popular than Life Begins at 550, better selling than The Big Bang Theory, A Personal View by Eccentrica Golumbitz, the triple-breasted whore of Eroticon 6, and more controversial than Oolong Kalufid's latest blockbusting title, Everything You Never Wanted to Know About Sex, but have been forced to find out. And, in many of the more relaxed civilizations on the outer eastern rim of the galaxy, it has long supplanted the great Encyclopaedia Galactica as the standard repository of all knowledge and wisdom, for though it has many omissions and contains much that is apocryphal, or at least wildly inaccurate, it scores over the older and more pedestrian work in two important respects. First, it is slightly cheaper, and secondly, it has the words "Don't Panic" printed in large, friendly letters on its cover. Oh, I hate it when that happens. Oh, it gets stuck and then it's really painful. And then you can drink and it's still really painful on the way down. And it's just ugh. And then if it gets stuck there, you can start hiccuping. It is, of course, that invaluable companion for all those who want to see the marvels of the known universe for less than $30 Eltarian a day. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you stood with your back to the main entrance lobby of the guide offices, assuming you had landed by now and freshened up with a quick dip and a shower, and then walked east, you would pass along a leafy shade of Life Boulevard, be amazed by the pale golden colour of the beaches stretching away to your left, astounded by the mined surfers floating carelessly along 2 feet above the waves as if it was nothing special, surprised and eventually slightly irritated by the giant palm trees that hum toneless nothings throughout the daylight hours. In other words, continuously. Now, what's your favourite song? If you then walked to the end of Life Boulevard, you would enter the Lalamatine district of shops, Bullernut trees and pavement cafes where the Batans come to relax after a hard afternoon's relaxation on the beach. The Lalamatine district is one of those very few areas which doesn't enjoy a perpetual Saturday afternoon. It enjoys, instead, the cool of a perpetual early Saturday evening. Behind it lie the nightclubs. If, on this particular day, afternoon, stretch of evening time, call it what you will, you had approached the second pavement cafe on the right, you would have seen the usual crowd of Batans chatting, drinking, looking very relaxed, and casually glancing at each other's watches to see how expensive they were. I do, but I don't have it set up yet. You would also have seen a couple of rather dishevelled-looking hitchhikers from Algol, who had recently arrived on an Arcturan megafreighter aboard which they had been roughing it for a few days. They were angry and bewildered to discover that here, within sight of the Hitchhiker's Guide building itself, a simple glass of fruit juice cost the equivalent of over $60 Altarian. "Sell out," said one of them bitterly. If at that moment you had then looked at the next table, but one of you would have seen Zaphod Beeblebrock sitting and looking very startled and confused. The reason for his confusion was that 5 seconds earlier he had been sitting on the bridge of the starship Heart of Gold. "Absolute sellout," said the voice again. Zaphod looked nervously out of the corners of his eyes at the two dishevelled hitchhikers at the next table. Where the hell was he? How had he got there? Where was his ship? His hand felt the arm of his chair on which he was sitting, and then the table in front of him. They seemed solid enough. He sat very still. "How can they sit and write a guide for hitchhikers in a place like this?" continued the voice. "I mean, look at it. Look at it!" Zaphod was looking at it. Nice place, he thought. But where? And why? He fished in his pocket for 2 pairs of sunglasses. In the same pocket he felt a hard, smooth, unidentified lump of very heavy metal. He pulled it out and looked at it. He blinked at it in surprise. Where had he got that? He returned it to his pocket and put on the sunglasses, annoyed to discover that the metal object had scratched one of the lenses. Nevertheless, he felt much more comfortable with them on. There were a double pair of Janta 200 superchromatic peril sensitive sunglasses, which had been specially designed to help people develop a relaxed attitude to danger. At the first hint of trouble, they turn totally black and thus prevent you from seeing anything that might alarm you. That sounds like a good invention, actually. I mean, for some people. Apart from the scratched lenses, they were clear. Apart from the scratch, the lenses were clear. He relaxed, but only a little bit. The angry hitchhiker continued to glare at his monstrously expensive fruit juice. "Worst thing that ever happened to the Guide, moving to Ursa Minor Beta," he grumbled. "They've all gone soft. You know, I've even heard that they created a whole electronically synthesized universe in one of their offices so they can go and research stories during the day and still go to parties in the evening. Not that day and evening mean much in this place." Ursa Minor Beta, thought Zaphod. At least he knew where he was. He assumed that this must be his great-grandfather's doing. But why? Much to his annoyance, a thought popped into his mind. It was very clear and very distinct, and he had now come to recognise these thoughts for what they were. His instinct was to resist them. They were the preordained promptings from the dark and locked-off parts of his mind. He sat still and ignored the thought furiously. It nagged at him. He ignored it. It nagged at him. He ignored it. It nagged at him. He gave in to it. What the hell, he thought. Go with the flow. He was too tired, confused and hungry to resist. He didn't even know what the thought meant. Chapter 6. Hello, yes. Megadodo Publications, home of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the most totally remarkable book in the whole of the known universe. Can I help you? Said the large pink-winged insect into one of the 70 phones lined up along the vast chrome expanse of the reception desk in the foyer of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy offices. It fluttered its wings and rolled its eyes. It glared at all the grubby people cluttering up the foyer, soiling the carpets and leaving dirty hand marks on the upholstery. It adored working for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It just wished there was some way of keeping all the hitchhikers away. Weren't they meant to be hanging around dirty spaceports or something? It was certain that it had read something somewhere in the book about the importance of hanging around dirty spaceports. Unfortunately, most of them seemed to come and hang around in this nice, clean, shiny foyer after hanging around in extremely dirty spaceports. And all they ever did was complain. It shivered its wings. What? It said into the phone. Yes, I passed your message to Mr. Zarnywhoop, but I'm afraid he's too cool to see you right now. He's on an intergalactic cruise. It waved a petulant tentacle at one of the grubby people who was angrily trying to engage its attention. The petulant tentacle directed the angry person to look at the notice on the wall to its left and not to interrupt an important phone call. Yes, said the insect. He is in this office, but he's on an intergalactic cruise. Thank you so much for calling. It slammed down the phone. Read the notice, it said to the angry man who was trying to complain about one of the more ludicrous and dangerous pieces of misinformation contained in the guidebook. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is an indispensable companion to all those who are keen to make sense of life in an infinitely complex and confusing universe. For though it cannot hope to be useful or informative on all matters, it does at least make the reassuring claim that where it is inaccurate, it is always at least definitely inaccurate. In cases of major discrepancy, it's always reality that's got it wrong. Gotta make your own reality. Live in your own. Reject the real reality. This was the gist of the notice, it said. The guide is definitive, reality is frequently inaccurate. This has led to some interesting consequences. For instance, when the editors of the guide were sued by the families of those who had died as a result of taking the entry on the planet Tral literally, it said ravenous bug bladder beasts often make very good meal for visiting tourists, instead of ravenous bug bladder beasts often make a very good meal of visiting tourists. They claimed that the first version of the sentence was more aesthetically pleasing, summoned a qualified poet to testify under oath that beauty was truth, truth beauty, and hoped thereby to prove that the guilty party was life itself for failing to be either beautiful or true. The judges concurred, and in a moving speech held that life itself was in contempt of court, and duly confiscated it from all those there present before going off to enjoy a pleasant evening's ultra golf. Zaphod Beeblebrox entered the foyer. He strode up to the insect receptionist. Okay, he said. Where is Zarnywhoop? Get me Zarnywhoop. Excuse me, sir, said the insect icily. It did not care to be addressed in this manner. Zarnywhoop. Get him, right? Get him now. Well, sir, snapped the fragile little creature, if you could be a little cool about it. Look, said Zaphod, I'm up to here with cool, okay? I'm so amazingly cool, you could keep a side of meat inside of me for a month. I am so hip, I have difficulty seeing over my pelvis. Now will you move before I blow it? Well, if you'd let me explain, sir, said the insect, tapping the most petulant of all tentacles at its disposal. I'm afraid that isn't possible right now, as Mr. Zarnywhoop is on an intergalactic cruise. Hell, thought Zaphod. When's he going to be back? He said. Back, sir? He's in his office. Zaphod paused while he tried to sort this particular thought out in his mind. He didn't succeed. The cat's on an intergalactic cruise. In his office? He leaned forward and gripped the tapping tentacle. Listen, Three Eyes, he said. Don't you try to outweird me. I get stranger things than you for free with my breakfast cereal. Well, just think, who do you think you are, honey? Flounced the insect quivering its wings in rage. Zaphod Beeblebrox or something? Count the heads, said Zaphod with a low rasp. The insect blinked at him. It blinked at him again. You are Zaphod Beeblebrox? It squeaked. Yeah, said Zaphod. But don't shout it out or they'll all want one. The Zaphod Beeblebrox? No, just a Zaphod Beeblebrox. Didn't you hear I come in 6-packs? The insect rattled its tentacles together in agitation. But sir, it squealed, I just heard on the sub-ether radio report. It said you were dead. Yeah, that's right, said Zaphod. I just haven't stopped moving yet. Now, where do I find Zarnywhoop? Well, sir, his office is on the 15th floor, but he's on an intergalactic cruise, yeah.
How do I get to him?
The newly installed Sirius Cybernetics Corporation vertical people transporters are in the far corner, sir. But, sir... Zaphod was turning to go. He turned back.
Yeah?
He said. Can I ask you why you want to see Mr. Zarnywhoop?
Yeah, said Zaphod, who was unclear on this point himself. I told myself I had to.
Come again, sir?
Zaphod leaned forward, conspiratorially. I just materialized out of thin air in one of your cafes, he said, as a result of an argument with the ghost of my great-grandfather. No sooner had I got here than my former self, the one that operated on my brain, popped into my head and said, "Go see Zarnywhoop." I've never heard of the cat. That's all I know. That and the fact that I've got to find out the man who rules the universe. He winked.
Mr. Beeblebrox, sir, said the insect in awed wonder. You're so weird, you should be in movies.
Yeah, said Zaphod, patting the thing on a glittering pink wing. And you, baby, should be in real life. The insect paused for a moment to recover from its agitation, and then reached out a tentacle to answer a ringing phone. A metal hand restrained it. "Excuse me," said the owner of the metal hand in a voice that would have made an insect of more sentimental disposition collapse in tears. This was not such an insect, and it couldn't stand robots.
"Yes, sir," it snapped. "Can I help you?"
"I doubt it," said Marvin.
"Well, in that case, if you'll just excuse me."
6 of the phones were now ringing. A million things awaited the insect's attention. "No one can help me," returned Marvin.
"Yes, well, sir."
"Not that anyone's tried, of course." The restraining metal hand fell limply by Marvin's side. His head hung forward very slightly.
"Is that so?"
said the insect tartly. "Hardly worth anyone's while to help a menial robot, is it?"
"I'm sorry, sir, if..."
"I mean, where's the percentage in being kind or helpful to a robot if it doesn't have any gratitude circuits?"
"And you don't have any?" said the insect, who didn't seem to be able to drag itself out of this conversation.
"I've never had the opportunity or occasion to find out," Marvin informed it.
"Listen, you miserable heap of maladjusted metal."
"Aren't you going to ask me what I want?" The insect paused. Its long, thin tongue darted out and licked its eyes and darted back again.
"Is it worth it?"
it asked. "Is anything?" said Marvin immediately.
"What do you want?"
"I'm looking for someone."
"Who?"
hissed the insect. "Zaphod Beeblebrox," said Marvin. "He's over there." The insect shook with rage. It could hardly speak.
"Then why did you ask me?"
it screamed. "I just wanted someone to talk to," said Marvin.
"What?"
Pathetic, isn't it? With a grinding of gears, Marvin turned and trundled off. He caught up with Zaphod, approaching the elevators. Zaphod spun around in astonishment. "Hey, Marvin," he said. "Marvin, how did you get here?" Marvin was forced to say something which came very hard to him. "I don't know," he said. "But one moment I was sitting in your ship feeling very depressed, and the next moment I was standing here feeling utterly miserable. An improbability field, I expect." "Yeah," said Zaphod. "I expect my great-grandfather sent you along to keep me company." "Thanks a bundle, Grandad," he added to himself under his breath. "So how are you?" he said aloud. "Oh, fine," said Marvin, "if you happen to like being me. Which I personally don't." Yeah, said Zaphod as the elevator doors opened.
"Hello," said the elevator sweetly. "I am to be your elevator for this trip to the floor of your choice. I have been designed by the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation to take you, the visitor to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, into these offices. If you enjoy your ride, which will be swift and pleasurable, then you may have care to experience some of the other elevators which have recently been installed in the offices of the Galactic Tax Department, Boobaloo Baby Foods, and the Syrian State Mental Hospital, where many ex-Sirius Cybernetics Corporation executives will be delighted to welcome your visits, sympathy, and happy tales of the outside world." "Yeah," said Zaphod, stepping into it. What else do you do besides talk? I go up, said the elevator. Or down. Good, said Zaphod. We're going up. Or down, the elevator reminded him. Yeah, okay. Up, please. There was a moment of silence. Down's very nice, suggested the elevator hopefully. Oh yeah. Super. Good, said Zaphod. Now will you take us up? May I ask you, inquired the elevator in its sweetest, most reasonable voice, if you considered all the possibilities that down might offer you? Zaphod knocked one of his heads against the inside wall. He didn't need this, he thought to himself. This, of all things, he had no need of. He hadn't asked to be here. If he was asked at this moment where he would like to be, he would probably have said he would like to be lying on the beach with at least 50 beautiful women and a small team of experts working out new ways they could be nice to him, which was his usual reply. To this, he would probably have added something passionate on the subject of food. One thing he didn't want to be doing, was chasing after the man who ruled the universe, who was only doing a job which he might as well keep at, because if it wasn't him, it would only be someone else. Most of all, he didn't want to be standing in an office block arguing with an elevator. Like, what other possibilities? He asked wearily. Well, the voice trickled on like honey on biscuits. There's the basement, the microfiles, the heating system. It paused. Nothing particularly exciting, it admitted, but they are alternatives. Holy Zarquan, muttered Zaphod. Did I ask for an existentialist elevator? He beat his fists against the wall. What's the matter with this thing? He spat. It doesn't want to go up, said Marvin simply. I think it's afraid. Afraid? Cried Zaphod. Of what? Heights? An elevator that's afraid of heights? No, said the elevator miserably. Of the future. The future? Exclaimed Zaphod. What's the wretched thing want? A pension scheme? At that moment a commotion broke out in the reception hall behind them. From the walls around them came the sound of suddenly active machinery. We can all see into the future, whispered the elevator in what sounded like terror. It's part of our programming. Zaphod looked out of the elevator. An agitated crowd had gathered around the elevator area, pointing and shouting. Every elevator in the building was coming down very fast. He ducked back in. Marvin, he said, just get this elevator to go up, will you? We've got to get to Zarniwoop. Hey Evie, how you doing? What? Why? Asked Marvin dolefully. I don't know, said Zaphod, but when I find him, he'd better have a very good reason for wanting me to see him. Modern elevators are strange and complex entities. The ancient electric winch and maximum capacity 8-persons jobs bear as much relation to Sirius Cybernetics Corporation Happy Vertical People Transporters as a packet of mixed nuts does to the entire west wing of the Syrian State Mental Hospital. This was because they operate on the curious principle of defocused temporal perception. In other words, they have the capacity to see dimly into the immediate future, which enables the elevator to be on the right floor to pick you up even before you knew you wanted it, thus eliminating all the tedious chatting, relaxing and making friends that people were previously forced to do whilst waiting for elevators. I appreciate it. I'm going to be ending soon though, because I only like reading for a couple hours at most. But thank you for stopping in. Not unnaturally, many elevators imbued with intelligence and precognition became terribly frustrated with the mindless business of going up and down, experimented briefly with the notion of going sideways as a sort of existential protest, demanded participation in the decision-making process, and finally took to squatting in basements sulking. An impoverished hitchhiker visiting any planets in the Sirius star system these days can pick up easy money working as a counsellor for neurotic elevators. At the 15th floor, the elevator's doors opened quickly. 15th, said the elevator, and remember, I'm only doing this because I like your robot. Zaphod and Marvin bundled out of the elevator, which instantly snapped its doors shut and dropped as fast as its mechanism would take it. Zaphod looked around warily. The corridor was deserted and silent and gave no clue as to where Zarniwoop might be found. All the doors that led off down the corridor closed and unmarked. They were standing close to a bridge which led across from one tower of the building to the other. Through a large window, the brilliant sun of Ursa Minor Beta threw blocks of light in which danced small specks of dust. A shadow flitted past momentarily. "Left in the lurch by a lift," muttered Zaphod, who was feeling at his least jaunty. They both stood and looked in both directions. "You know something?" said Zaphod to Marvin. "More than you can possibly imagine." "I'm dead certain this building shouldn't be shaking," Zaphod said. It was just a light tremor through the soles of his feet, and another one. In the sunbeams, the flecks of dust danced more vigorously. Another shadow flitted past. Zaphod looked at the door. "Either," he said, not very confidently, "they've got some vibro system toning up your muscles while you work, or..." He walked across to the window and suddenly stumbled, because at that moment his Jujanta 200 superchromatic peril-sensitive sunglasses had turned utterly black. A large shadow flitted past the window with a sharp buzz. Zaphod ripped off his sunglasses, and as he did so, the building shook with a thunderous roar. He leapt to the window. "Or," he said, "this building's getting bombed." Another roar cracked through the building. "Who in the galaxy would want to bomb a publishing company?" asked Zaphod, but never heard Marvin's reply, because at that moment the building shook with another bomb attack. He tried to stagger back to the elevator, a pointless maneuver he realised, but the only one he could think of. Suddenly, at the end of the corridor leading at right angles from this one, he caught a sign of a figure as it lunged into view. A man. The man saw him. "Beeblebrox, over here!" he shouted. Zaphod eyed him with distrust as another bomb blast rocked the building. "No," called Zaphod. "Beeblebrox over here. Who are you?" "A friend!" shouted back the man. He ran towards Zaphod. "Oh yeah?" said Zaphod. "Anyone's friend in particular, or just generally well-disposed of people?" The man raced along the corridor, the floor bucking beneath his feet like an excited blanket. He was short, stocky and weather-beaten, and his clothes looked as if they'd been twice round the galaxy and back with him in them. "Do you know," Zaphod shouted in his ear when he arrived, "your building's being bombed?" The man indicated his awareness. It suddenly stopped being light, glancing around the window to see why. Zaphod gaped as a huge, slug-like, gunmetal green spacecraft crept through the air past the building. Two more followed it. The government you deserted is out to get you, Zaphod," hissed the man. "They sent a squadron of Frogstar fighters." "Frogstar fighters?" muttered Zaphod. "Zarquan." "You get the picture?" "What are Frogstar fighters?" Zaphod was sure he'd heard someone talk about them when he was president, but he never paid much attention to official matters. The man was pulling him back through a door. He went with him. With a searing whine, a small black spider-like object shot through the air and disappeared down the corridor. What was that? "Frogstar Scout Robot Class A looking out for you," said the man. "Hey, yeah?" "Get down!" From the opposite direction came a larger, black, spider-like object. It zapped past them. And that was... a Frogstar Scout Robot Class B, out looking for you. "And that?" said Zaphod as a third one seared through the air. "A Frogstar Scout Robot Class C looking out for you." "Hey," chuckled Zaphod to himself. "Pretty stupid robots, eh?" From over the bridge came a massive rumbling hum. A gigantic black shape was moving over it from the opposite tower, the size and shape of a tank. "Holy photon, what's that?" "A tank," said the man. "Frogstar Scout Robot Class D come to get you." "Should we leave?" "I think we should." "Marvin!" called Zaphod. "What do you want?" Marvin rose from a pile of rubble further down the corridor and looked at him. "You see that robot coming towards us?" Marvin looked at the gigantic black shape edging forward towards them over the bridge. He looked down at his own small metal body. He looked up at the tank. "I suppose you want me to stop it," he said. "Yeah, whilst you save your skins." "Yeah," said Zaphod. "Get in there." "Just so long," said Marvin, "as I know where I stand." The man tugged at Zaphod's arm, and Zaphod followed him off down the corridor. A point occurred to him about this.
Where are we going?
Zarneywoop's office. Is this time any time to keep an appointment? Come on. Chapter 7. Marvin stood at the end of the bridge corridor. He was not, in fact, a particularly small robot. His silver body gleamed in the dusty sunbeams and shook with the continual barrage which the building was still undergoing. He did, however, look pitifully small as the gigantic black tank rolled to a halt in front of him. The tank examined him with a probe. The probe withdrew. Marvin stood there. "Out of my way, little robot," growled the tank.
I'm afraid, said Marvin, that I've been left here to stop you.
The probe extended again for a quick recheck. It withdrew again.
"You? Stop me?" roared the tank. "Go on!"
"No, really, I have," said Marvin simply.
"What are you armed with?"
roared the tank in disbelief.
"Guess,"
said Marvin. The tank's engines rumbled, its gears ground. Molecule-sized electronic relays deep in its microbrain flipped backwards and forwards in consternation.
"Yes,"
said the tank. Zaphod and the yet unnamed man lurched up one corridor, down a second and along a third. The building continued to rock and judder, and this puzzled Zaphod. If they wanted to blow the building up, why was it taking so long? With difficulty, they reached one of a number of totally anonymous unmarked doors and heaved at it. With a sudden jolt, it opened and they fell inside. All this way, thought Zaphod, all this trouble, all this not lying on the beach having a wonderful time, and for what? A single chair, a single desk, and a single dirty ashtray in an undecorated office. The desk, apart from a bit of dancing dust and a single revolutionary form of paperclip, were empty.
"Where,"
said Zaphod, "is Zarneywoop?" Feeling that this already tenuous grasp of the point of this whole exercise was beginning to slip. "He's on an intergalactic cruise," said the man. Zaphod tried to size the man up. Earnest type, he thought, not a barrel of laughs. He probably apportioned a fair whack of his time to running up and down heaving corridors, breaking down doors and making cryptic remarks in empty offices. "Let me introduce myself," the man said. "My name is Rooster, and this is my towel." "Hello, Rooster," said Zaphod. "Hello, towel," he added, as Rooster held it out to him with a rather nasty old flowery towel. Not knowing what to do with it, he shook it by the corner. Outside the window, one of the huge slug-like gunmetal green spaceships growled past.
"Yes, go on," said Marvin to the huge battle machine. "You'll never guess."
Said the machine, vibrating with unaccustomed thought.
"Laser beams?"
Marvin shook his head solemnly.
"No,"
muttered the machine, its deep guttural rumble.
"Too obvious. Antimatter ray?"
it hazarded.
"Far too obvious,"
admonished Marvin.
"Yes," grumbled the machine, somewhat abashed. How about an electronic ram?"
That was new to Marvin.
"What's that?"
he said.
"One of these,"
said the machine with enthusiasm. From its turret emerged a sharp prong which spat a single lethal blaze of light. Behind Marvin, a wall roared and collapsed as a heap of dust. The dust billowed briefly and then settled.
"No," said Marvin. "Not one of those."
"Good though, isn't it?"
"Very good,"
agreed Marvin.
"I know,"
said the Frogstar battle machine after another moment's consideration.
"You must have one of those new xanthic restructon destabilized xenon emitters."
"Nice, are they?"
"That's what you've got?" said the machine in considerable awe.
"No," said Marvin.
"Oh,"
said the machine, disappointed.
"Then it must be..."
"You're thinking along the wrong lines," said Marvin. "You're failing to take into account something fairly basic in the relationship between men and robots."
I know," said the battle machine. "Is it..."
It tailed off into thought again. "Just think," urged Marvin. "They left me, an ordinary menial robot, to stop you, a gigantic heavy-duty battle machine, whilst they ran off to save themselves. What do you think they would leave me with? Ooh, muttered the machine in alarm. Something pretty damn devastating, I should expect. Expect, said Marvin. Oh yes, expect. I'll tell you what they gave me to protect myself with, shall I? Yes, all right, said the battle machine, bracing itself. Nothing, said Marvin. That was a dangerous pause. Nothing? Roared the battle machine. Nothing at all, intoned Marvin dismally. Not an electronic sausage. The machine heaved itself about with fury. Well, doesn't that just take the biscuit? It roared. Nothing, eh? Just don't think, do they? And me, said Marvin in a soft, low voice, with this terrible pain in all the diodes down my left side. Makes you spit, doesn't it? Yes, agreed Marvin with feeling. Hell, that makes me angry, bellowed the machine. Think I'll smash that wall down. The electronic ram stabbed out another searing blaze of light and took out the wall next to the machine. How do you think I feel? Said Marvin bitterly. Just ran off and left you, did they? The machine thundered. Yes, said Marvin. I think I'll shoot down their bloody ceiling as well, raged the tank. It took out the ceiling of the bridge. That's very impressive, murmured Marvin. You ain't seen nothing yet, promised the machine. I could take out the floor too, no problem. He took out the floor too. Hell's bells! The machine roared as it plummeted 15 stories and smashed itself to bits on the ground below. What a depressingly stupid machine, said Marvin and trudged away. He's depressed, but he's also very smart. He does have the brain the size of a planet, you know. Anyway, I think, given that it's nearly 2.5 hours since I started, I'm going to leave it there for the day. And I'm glad I made the progress I did. So thank you very much for joining me, and those that came to watch, those that stayed, those that came and watched for a bit and then left, and just those who checked in and followed and said hi. It's been much appreciated. And I hope you at least enjoyed it a little bit if you were sticking around. Otherwise, then, well... Oh, thank you, Claire. Hiya. Wasn't expecting to see you here. Thank you for showing up. And, yeah. So, I'm going to leave it there. And I think we're at chapter 8 now. So, yeah, I'll make a note of that. And I'll see everyone, at least some people tomorrow, because it's Paradise Killer. And I want to make more progress and hopefully end the game. And then move on to something more fun. Or not more fun, but more interesting in the long term. Anyway, take care, guys. And thanks again. Goodbye for now. Bye.